Hey there everyone, Josiah here with a YouTube video on how to create your own website using SpringMVC and then connecting to a Microsoft SQL Server database. To get started right away, we're going to need a few things downloaded and installed to our computer. First of all, you'll need some sort of Java IDE. I'm going to be using NetBeans for this tutorial, though I know another popular Java IDE is Eclipse, and you'll likely be able to follow along in Eclipse just as easily. You can download NetBeans from netbeans.org and just go to their downloads page. You will also need a Java Development Kit, JDK. You will likely already have this installed on your computer, but if you don't, you can go to oracle.com and go to their download pages. It's the Oracle Technology Network Java ST downloads, and you'll see a whole list of JDKs to download. Make sure you get the Java Development Kit 1.8 or higher. You will also need Apache Maven. You can download that from maven.apache.org and go to their downloads page. You can see here that they require a Java Development Kit. That's why we're downloading one. And then you will probably want to get the Apache Maven zip file and extract that onto your local machine. Once you're done, you should be able to have NetBeans running, and you will also have extracted onto your computers a Java JDK. Here's mine in my C Program Files Java folder, Java JDK 1.8.0. There's really no installation required for the JDK. You just export it or extract it right onto your C drive. And then in my Program Files 86, that's where I have my Apache Maven installed, Apache Maven 3.5.0. As I said, there's really no installation required for most of these components besides NetBeans. However, for Apache Maven, you do need to set up an environment variable, and this is something that's very easy to overlook. In Windows, it's very simple. Just go to your Start menu and start typing in environment, and fairly quickly, you should see Edit the System Environment Variables showing up in your control panel. You can select this option, and then you go to your environment variables, and then you need to set one up for Java Home. Mine, as you recall, was in C Program Files Java JDK 1.8.0_05 folder. So I just created a new environment variable called Java_Home, all caps, and set it to that directory. Once you have that done, you should have everything you need to complete this tutorial. Okay, now that we have Apache Maven 3.5 installed, Java JDK 1.8 or higher installed, and an environment variable set up for our Java Home directory, we are going to create a new project in NetBeans IDE. So go ahead and select File, New Project, choose Maven as a category, and just choose Java Application. For the project name, I'm going to call mine Simple Website Demo. For directory, I'm just going to browse to a new location and create a new folder called Simple Website Demo. You can put this wherever you would like. The names won't really matter too much for your project. I just encourage you to keep things organized. For the package, I'm going to get rid of it because we'll be creating our own packages, and then the group ID and version can remain the same. Now that we have this simple website demo project created, I'll go ahead and show you around. We have this project's files, pom.xml, which currently is pretty much empty, and we'll have to go ahead and copy some code directly into there. We don't have any dependencies, and we don't have anything in our source packages. So first things first, let's get this POM XML populated with some code that I like to pull just off of the internet. I go ahead and Google SpringMVC tutorial, and I get this Getting Started Spring Web Content with SpringMVC, and they have a nice sample pom.xml in this tutorial that I'm just going to copy and paste for the sake of my tutorial. In this tutorial, under Build with Maven, there's this pom.xml, and I'm just going to copy and paste this all directly into my pom.xml. Essentially what this is doing is it's going to be telling Maven where all of our dependencies are from. Essentially it's telling us that we're going to be using the Spring framework, the SpringMVC framework, to communicate between our front and back end. And when I save that, our dependency list suddenly grows very large, and we get a lot of different things. Most of them are from SpringMVC, and these are just all the different things that we'll need in order to get our back end to communicate with the front end. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually create some source packages. I like to do this in Windows Explorer because sometimes when I do it in the NetBeans IDE Explorer, I just run into a few issues, and I think it's easier to do it this way because I have more control over my file hierarchy. So in my Documents folder, I'm going to go to my Simple Website Demo directory, and in my source directory, I have source, main, Java, and now I'm going to create a file called, or a folder called hello, which will serve as a sample package for us right away. That was actually a little bit easier than it is usually. A lot of times this initial file directory of source main Java doesn't already exist for me, but it looks like it automatically created it this time. So I don't think I would have had any issues just to add a source package directly to the source packages folder. So this hello package is going to serve as the package that we're just going to try and create a simple back-end to front-end communication. So I'm going to right-click on here and say New Java Class, and this will be the Greetings controller. Now that we have this greetings controller.java file created, I'm going to copy and paste some more code from the SpringMVC tutorial and just make a few minor changes to it to make it a little bit more clear. So farther down in this Spring.io tutorial that I had open before, we have a greeting controller.java class, and I'm going to copy and paste this and overwrite all of the auto-generated code. First thing I'm going to have to change is I called my class the greetings controller. This is just greeting controller. So I'm going to have to add an S, and I'm going to rename my project to have a capitalized G. There we go. So I got my controller renamed to be the greetings controller with a capital G, just to keep things neat and organized. And I copied and pasted this code from the online tutorial. I'm just going to fix some indentation settings here really fast and pull my braces down onto a new line. The important things are that we're importing the Spring Framework utilities that we need, and we have this greetings controller class, which is tagged as a controller. That's part of the Spring Framework. And then we have this method right here called the greeting method, and it's got a mapping to this /greeting. And essentially, you'll see this in action in a few minutes, but this request mapping right here is saying that if you were to visit our URL for this web page, wherever it's being hosted, and then put a /greeting after the base URL, this method would be called, and it would return the model that is passed into this method as well. So pretty much all of this is being handled by the Spring Framework. We're just defining what these methods will do and what information it'll spit back out to the front end. So for those of you that are not familiar with the terminology here, this is our back end. This is our server-side script. So this is going to receive a request. That's why it's called a request mapping. It's going to receive a request from the front end. It's going to execute this method, and then it's going to spit back out a model, which will then be sent to the front end, and then the front end will determine how it wants to display that. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Just to talk over what's going on here, we also have this at request param, and we're saying that the value is name, it's not required, and its default value is world, and it's put right before this other string called name. I'm actually going to rename this variable in here because it gets really complicated for me to say the word name over and over again. So I'm going to change this from name to be nValue. So it's essentially an abbreviation for name value, but it differentiates itself from this name here. So let me explain what I just did here. This parameter, the value name, is what will have to appear in the URL to pass this parameter from the front end. So if you were to put a question mark name equals and then some string value, the value in that URL would then be assigned to nValue. This nValue is just simply being put right back into the model and it's going to match another parameter also called name. So essentially we have three different names here. That's why I changed one of them to nValue. The name of the parameter being passed in. Then we have nValue, which is what our server side is using, and then we're taking that nValue and we're putting in a model with under a parameter called, or an attribute called name, and sending that back to the front end. So now let's actually look at how we can get this value to be shown in the front end. We're going to need another package. Here in other sources, we have source main resources. If you don't have that already, you should be able to create that by going into Windows Explorer and then going to your simple website directory or whatever you called it, and then adding in next to Java a resources folder, and that will create this other sources package. And so we're going to add a new Java package in here, and we're going to call it templates. Now that we have our templates package created, I'm going to add a new HTML file, and I'm going to call this greeting.html, greeting. You have to make sure that this file, greeting.html, has the same name as what's returned by our greeting method. So when this method completes, when it says return greeting, it's essentially returning this greeting.html file to the front end. Now, to save myself from having to write some HTML for you guys, I'm also going to copy the HTML directly from the Spring.io tutorial online. I'm going to copy and paste that directly in, and really all this is doing is it's displaying one line of text, hello, comma, then some value name and an exclamation point. So just to clarify, this name has it corresponds to this name, the attribute in the model, which has the value n value, and this value was specified by what was put into the URL by the user in their browser with this name tag next to it. So let's see if this actually makes some sense once we run it, because that's kind of complicated. You can see why I changed that name to be n value, because that would be one more thing that I would be calling name, and it gets kind of confusing. So to actually be able to run this in our IDE, we just need one more thing, and that's this class right here, application.java. It gives us a main function, and all it has is springapplication.run. So I think this is actually going to be the last thing I'm going to copy. I'm going to create a new Java class, call it application, and in here I'm just going to paste all of that code, reformat it just a little bit for my own sake. And now we have our entry point, so if I try and run this, I can choose hello.application, so it's going to run this code right here, select that main class, and let's see what happens. Notice here in the background, Java home, that's that environment variable. If you didn't have this set up, it wouldn't be working. That's something that caused me some grief at one point. I couldn't figure out what was going wrong, and it's just because I was on a machine that didn't have a Java home variable set up, and it didn't really tell me what was wrong. It took me a long time to figure that out. So let's see what's going wrong here. We have an error. First of all, if you weren't paying attention, it might look like this worked because it says build success at the bottom in green, but it does say above it application failed to start. And so you have to go and look and see where your error occurred. And for us, it's this error 10792, failed to start endpoint associated with protocol handler, something about HTTP NIO 8080, a lot of information here, and then really the most descriptive thing is right underneath the description. The Tomcat connector configured to listen on port 8080 failed to start. The port may already be in use or the connector may be misconfigured. So we have to, essentially what's wrong is my machine doesn't like to communicate over port 8080. Perhaps your machine will work for port 8080. Mine clearly does not. So we need to, I'll show you how to change this because it's going to be useful to know how to change which port you're communicating over. And in my source main resources, I'm going to create a new Java package and I'm going to call this config. I don't believe the name of this one would matter, but this is where I'm going to be putting my configuration files, and I'm going to add a new, I believe, XML file. So I'm going to go, or I'm sorry, a properties file. That's what I'm thinking of. So when I go new, go to other, I need a properties file. Select that, and I'm going to call this application. And this name is important. It has to be called application.properties. Create that, and in here, I'm just going to get rid of the auto-generated comments, and I'm going to say server.port is equal to 8082. Alright, now that we have server port changed to 8082, make sure you rebuild. Otherwise, if you just tried to run again, it wouldn't realize that your settings had actually changed, and you just run into the same issue over and over again. Once that builds, you can go ahead and run, and then in just a few seconds, the application should be built, should be running, and then we can actually go and see if this is working by looking at our server in our web browser. Cool. So the hello application here, the last line of the info spit out by SpringMVC, started the application in 5.83 seconds. Awesome, it's running. You can see in the bottom here that it's currently running. It says run GS server web content. If we go in, I'm going to use Google Chrome, but you should be able to do this in any web browser. I'm going to go to our local host. That's where our project is currently hosted. Port 8082 is the one I'm using, assuming you changed your port to 8082 as well. If we go there, we get a white label error page. And this is because in our greetings controller, we only have one thing, and it's mapped to this /greeting. We don't have anything mapped to an automatic home page or any other page. So if we just go to our base URL, nothing is there. However, if we append a /greeting to the end of our URL, we get hello world. Now, why did we get hello world? Well, that's because we just sent a request with this /greeting, which was then picked up by this mapping here, and we didn't specify a value for this name parameter. So it took the default value world and assigned it to end value, and all we did is add it to this attribute here with the attribute name of name, and then we returned the greeting HTML file. So if we look in our greeting HTML file, we put that name parameter, or the attribute in our model that is, directly into this line, and it had its default value of world. Let's go ahead and see if we can get it to change. So now instead of just saying greeting, I'm going to put a question mark, and I'm going to say name equals Josiah. Now it says hello Josiah because it took what was after this name parameter and put it into our controller, which then put it into our model. So that's the very basics of SpringMVC. The next thing we're going to be doing is maybe we'll add a few more calls like that around our website, and then we're going to get started on creating a Microsoft database and accessing it from our website. So that'll be pretty exciting. I look forward to making that video and getting it up in the next week or so.